I have been a mother for decades. My children were rather spread out in age, and therefore it was 30 years before the last one left the nest. After my children left home, however, I kept taking on others, all of whom I call, in our local Cajun French accent, my other children. I am driven to mother nearly everyone I come in contact with. The most recent additions to the family were Hurricane Katrina evacuees from New Orleans.
I am a wife, a mother, and I'm also an artist. In February 2005, my MFA graduate show, entitled Leaving, was an installation recreating a space from a third-floor attic. It depicts an empty room containing a small wooden chest and the image of a door opening onto another room with packed boxes, furniture, and a window looking out onto treetops. It symbolized a psychological and emotional separation from my former roles as housewife and mother. I imagined myself flying out the window, shedding the constraints of my former life.
I am an artist as well. Being an artist is like having a second skin that you cannot take off. Being an artist and being a mother, to me, seems to be all of a piece.
Summer 2005. I foresee another hurricane like Betsy, which hit New Orleans 40 years ago in 1965. The Weather Channel has been reminding us every summer for years that New Orleans is at risk for another Betsy or Camille. Thus, over the course of several years, I have been putting together my hurricane preparedness kit. Not an evacuation kit, mind you. My husband and I have no intention of leaving the city. We never have. If the storm strengthens, we plan to evacuate vertically to Deming House, the medical school dormitory downtown. This has several advantages. Rather than leaving town and having difficulty coming back after the storm, we can stay in a sturdy high-rise building with an emergency generator. Armed with a battery-operated TV, radios, flashlights, extra batteries, candles, waterproof matches, insect repellent, a pantry full of canned food, and bottled water, we are prepared to stay in the city. We have plywood boards to nail over the windows and blue tarps to cover the furniture. We don't need an axe in the attic because we can crawl out of the attic window. The last items to be added are 2 life jackets and a sturdy inflatable raft. My family thinks this is quite funny. August 28th. Katrina is due to make landfall tomorrow, but today is extremely hot and sunny, not a cloud or a drop of rain in sight. My husband and I take a break from battening down and boarding up the house to barbecue and take a swim. We cool off while using some of the food in our freezer. When we finish boarding up, news reports show Katrina intensifying and bearing down on New Orleans. So we pack up both cars with sheets, pillows, and a few clothes in addition to our other supplies and head downtown, where we will park in the adjacent garage, protected from rising water or wind damage. The wind is whipping up at 5 o'clock as we drive down Chapatula Street, a treeless corridor along the Mississippi River.
Several months before Hurricane Katrina and Rita strike the Gulf Coast, I start making collages depicting dozens of houses with roofs, shutters, and doors flying off, and of the houses themselves flying through the air. I make a collage of New Orleans' iconic St. Louis Cathedral with pieces breaking off and being tossed away in the wind. In one collage, there's a group of people on the rooftop of a house, and throngs of people milling about at its base. Some of the people are airborne. I have a vivid dream where I'm trying to decide what to bring with me before fleeing an oncoming hurricane. I've already gotten my family to a shelter, but my nesting instincts tell me to rush back home to gather up more supplies, knowing that life in a shelter will not be comfortable. Later, when my hometown of Lafayette, Louisiana, begins filling up with evacuees, none of the televised lists of supplies that the shelters need mention feminine hygiene products, one of the things I rushed home to procure in my dream. And remembering that dream, I rush out to donate many bags and boxes of tampons to the local shelters.
August 29th. Katrina hit the city early this morning. I woke up at 7:30 to a droning noise that I mistook for the air conditioner. Surprised that the electricity had not gone off, I jumped up to look out the window from our 7th floor room. The noise I heard is the wind outside, blowing horizontally from downriver toward uptown, furiously breaking the branches of the live oak trees below. It's quiet for a short while before the wind then begins blowing in the opposite direction. We are relieved to hear on our portable radio that the storm has gone to the east and that New Orleans has once again dodged the bullet. Satisfied that we're safe, we take our time showering and getting dressed by flashlight before converging with the others in the manager's office. His grandfather died early Sunday morning at Baptist Hospital, so his family was unable to evacuate. His grandmother, his uncle, his parents, and his sister are here. His grandfather's doctor, whose own father died at home on Saturday night, is here too with his wife and sister. The rest of those in the building are the assistant manager's family. When we go up to the roof to survey the situation outside, we see a little water collecting in the streets. A few cars and people on foot are starting to venture out to survey the damage or to head for the Superdome. Across from us is the Hyatt Hotel, where all the windows facing downriver have been blown out. Torn curtains are flying out of the empty frames. The windows of other damaged buildings have twisted Venetian blinds dangling out. We feel lucky that our building is secure and undamaged. A generator is providing emergency lights in the hallways and powering a couple of panels of electric outlets on the 2nd floor. Cell phones are not reliable, but the landline in the office still works. We contact family and neighbors who are still in town. They tell us many trees are down, but there's not much water in the uptown streets. We are glued to the only radio station still broadcasting. Not much news. We hear from officials of neighboring parishes, but where is our mayor or our governor? The only reports about Orleans Parish come from listeners who call in. Boredom is setting in, and we've discussed leaving to go back home. The weather outside is beautiful, but there's enough water below to give us pause. It's only ankle deep here, but no telling what it will be further down the street, and the power is out everywhere. To stay or to go is on our minds today.
August 29th. Today, the Mississippi Gulf Coast was torn to shreds by Hurricane Katrina. There is literally nothing left, and this is an area that had been already severely decimated by Hurricane Camille back in 1969. Only a few of the venerable old antebellum homes and structures managed to resist the force of Camille. Jefferson Davis's beautiful and historic home on the waterfront, Beauvoir, made it through Camille. But post-Katrina, however, Beauvoir too is finally gone. But it does look like New Orleans has escaped the worst of it.
August 30th. Our world has been turned upside down. I've just talked with my sister-in-law, who stayed at home and was not worried yesterday. She's rushing to leave. She and my brother have cleaned out their refrigerator and are packing up their cars to head to Baptist Hospital as their street is beginning to flood. They have just spoken to a friend who is Director of Homeland Security in New Orleans. He told them that the levees have broken. This information has not been announced on the radio. To make matters worse, hospital security has just discovered the presence of our group in the dormitory. With the exception of the 2 managers, no one is supposed to be in our building. We have been told to report to the main hospital with our bags packed. We, the stowaways, have been discovered and will be thrown overboard. We feel like rats flushed out of hiding. After a tense 30 minutes standing on a bridge connecting our building to the main hospital, whoever is in charge decides to let us go back to our rooms. The hospital is already at capacity with patients and employees' families on every chair and sofa, the rest spilling out onto the carpets and into the hallways. The water continues to rise outside as well as inside the atrium on the 1st floor of the hospital. Looking out the window on the bridge, we see a truck is stalled in the rising water and is blocking the exit of the parking garage. If the water is too high for a truck, we certainly won't be able to drive out either. And there are rumors of random snipers. Because the electricity is still off, we clean out all perishable food from the refrigerators in 200 rooms. We start at the 8th floor and move down. The food isn't spoiled yet, but I am beginning to gag. We drag the bags down the hot, smelly, and soon garbage-strewn stairwells. We throw the stinking bags into the rising water outside. A short time later, our security guards come in carrying bulky black bags. We soon find out what they have in those bags. It is not their clothes. They are assembling very large automatic weapons. Our protectors quickly lose their official status and become only two exhausted young black men when they tell us, "You are looking at two former homeowners." They both had recently bought homes in New Orleans East, an area that is now underwater. They are cooling off in front of the only fan anywhere around. There is no second shift for any of the worn-out hospital personnel, and the oasis of cool air draws nurses, doctors, and administrators into our building. We hear stories of gunshots fired as patients are ferried by boat from one hospital to another. Most of the volunteer medical personnel helping out at the Superdome have left because of the dangerous situation there. Communication is deteriorating. Almost all phones are down now.
August 30th. But wait, the unthinkable is happening. The soaked levees are giving way and water is pouring into the city, inundating beautiful historic New Orleans. It is too sad to contemplate that we are all glued to the TV. We must flip from channel to channel, watching it happen over and over again, burning it into our brains like prisoners being scourged. We knew it would happen one day, yet we cannot believe that day is now.
September 1st. We were awakened before 6 o'clock this morning and told to pack everything up. We will be evacuated today. An evacuation attempt yesterday was aborted because of sniper fire. We are lining up on the ramp of the Saratoga Street garage. The line is already long. At 8:30, the hospital is closed to all but authorized personnel. There are no toilets out here, so people are making use of the dark stairwells. Eventually, a makeshift portable toilet is set up on the garage ramp. It consists of a handicapped toilet filled with kitty litter and a hospital screen set up around it for privacy. The screen blows down every time a Chinook helicopter takes off. So much for privacy. We hear on the radio that there's not enough food or water in the Superdome, and I know how much of both are still here in the hospital. Why can't someone get our excess supplies out to the people who need them? The inequity of it all is heartbreaking. The conditions for patients here are equally heartrending. They're being moved from the hospital to the garage for evacuation. There are not enough gurneys for all of them, so they are placed on plastic mats on the dirty garage floor. The patients seem strangely calm as nurses in cut-off scrubs and flip-flops fan them with cardboard. Mercifully, it's overcast today, so the heat is bearable. Everything is becoming surreal now. People with pets will have to go out by boat, truck, and buses because animals are not allowed on the helicopters. As we line up, someone says she saw a woman throw her little dog in the water after being told she couldn't get on the helicopter with an animal. Another couple gave their pet parrot to some friends who had a dog, the wife awkwardly explaining to me that her husband is diabetic and they need to get out quickly. Someone is checking the weight of our carry-on bags. We are limited to 10 pounds. We must decide what we will bring and what we will leave behind. One young woman, Julie, has put on 4 layers of clothes in spite of the oppressive heat. She lives in Deming House and all of her clothes are here. None of us knows if we'll ever see our left behind belongings again. The noise of choppers overhead has been constant since Monday. Even before the flooding, medevac crews from all over the country have been landing and taking off from the makeshift landing pad, each carrying a couple of patients at a time. Now there's a push to get them all out today. Then we will begin our evacuation. There are 120 two-lane patients still here. The flow of bodies being brought up to the 7th floor in the back of trucks or SUVs seems endless. Soon Charity Hospital patients begin coming in because sniper fire has forced the closure of the Superdome heliport. About 5:30, we're counted out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 16 in a group. Each group is stationed in a different stairwell to wait their turn. It's almost 12 hours before the first group of civilians is loaded onto a helicopter. Loud cheers ring out from the crowd. Now it's our turn.
August 31st. I do believe New Orleans to have been the most beautiful city in the country, and even the old neighborhoods of tiny wooden shotgun houses are fascinating. Time, it seems, had never touched them, but now the water is doing what time and hurricane-force winds could not. We don't know where many of our friends and relatives who live there have gone, or did they manage to get out? Where is Betsy, maker of exquisite jewelry, whose house had already flooded 3 times before? Where are tiny Susie, the silk painter, and her husband, Hamid? Where are our friends Ivy Billiot and Roy Parfait, the wood carvers, who live farther on down the river, and who can sometimes afford an ancient used vehicle and sometimes not? Has the earth turned upside down and shaken New Orleans off its crust?
September 2nd. Last night we arrived by helicopter at the New Orleans airport. From there we were bused to Lafayette, Louisiana. We got about 4 hours of sleep on an air mattress at a shelter before going to the Lafayette airport to rent a car. As we head north to our daughter's home in Nashville, we see convoys of National Guard trucks on the other side of the road, finally heading south to New Orleans. We hope that they can stabilize the terrible situation there. As we listen to national radio for the first time, I rehash in my head what has happened to the city and what is going on among our politicians, who all sound like crazies. Our mayor is using expletives, and our governor is telling the nation that our National Guard troops just back from Iraq are prepared to enter New Orleans and will shoot to kill. They will never save us, I moan.
September 4th. 3 evacuees will be arriving to stay with us today. Another will arrive tomorrow. I'm glad we have room for them. We barely know these people, but one of them, Mike, is a lawyer who my attorney husband Warren has worked with on a case or 2. Beautiful fair-haired Kate is also a lawyer, and curly-haired little Alexander is 4 years of age. They arrive at 9 p.m., looking rumpled and exhausted, but they cannot seem to stop talking. I pour the grown-ups a glass of wine, put Alexander down on the sofa in front of the TV, and listen for a good hour to their horror stories of what took place before they finally arrived here in Lafayette. Then I gently lead them up to the 3rd floor bedroom, which has a king-size bed for Mike and Kate, and a little child-sized bed for Alexander.
September 7th. Hurricane Katrina has damaged 75% of the city and destroyed almost the entire Mississippi Gulf Coast. I'm stunned when I realize that the installation, Leaving, that I worked on for months, almost a year ago, has foreshadowed the largest diaspora in the history of the United States. 2 million inhabitants of New Orleans and the Gulf Coast region are forced to leave their homes and flee to other towns and cities.
September 9th. Lafayette is overflowing with refugees. None of them knows where or how to start rebuilding their broken lives. My daughter-in-law is so stressed. All of her family's homes in the New Orleans area were completely wiped out, and everyone has evacuated to her house. It looks a bit like Christmas up and down my street. There are cars parked everywhere, as everyone has friends or relatives, or even, like us, perfect strangers staying with them. My son and daughter-in-law's driveway, a few blocks away, is full, and she just came running into my house crying because she backed into her sister Katie's car, the only material possession Katie had left in the world. It was the last straw. Tonight, I went to my son's house for barbecued shrimp, artichoke stuffed garlic bread, and wine. We still eat well here, but we drink more than we ever have. We are all so wound up by daily trying to solve so many problems that being together in the evening for a family meal and lots of soothing red wine is such a comforting refuge. Last night it was such a refuge for the woman who lives across the street from my son that he found her sound asleep and snoring on her driveway. She, the dignified wife of the pediatric surgeon, coping with an overflowing house full of New Orleans relatives. September 22nd. It is only 3 weeks after Hurricane Katrina, but unbelievably, another hurricane is barreling towards us, Hurricane Rita. This cannot be happening. I am too tired to think about another storm, but this one is huge. The coastal parishes directly to the south of us are already under a mandatory evacuation order. Homes in Lafayette, already housing evacuees from Katrina, are now taking in even more from Rita. Our New Orleans evacuees just want out, but now we are trying to decide if we too should evacuate. We've never had to do so before, and we are too mentally exhausted to think about it now. The hotels along the way are still filled to capacity with Katrina evacuees, and gasoline is nearly non-existent. September 24th. Outside, the wind is howling, frightening children and pets. The sky is black and low. Rain is blowing horizontally across the backyard, and the power has gone out. The whole family has moved to my daughter's house in Lafayette to ride out the storm, feeling illogically that there is safety in numbers. And once again, we are all glued to a generator-operated television. September 26th. The devastation from Rita in the low-lying parishes of South Louisiana is far worse than anticipated, and a finely drained New Orleans is inundated again by the storm surge. Although people are not yet being allowed back into the flooded areas, it is certain that my 87-year-old mother-in-law's house is underwater, as is her whole community of Henry, Louisiana.
September 26th, 4 weeks after Katrina. Finally, Hurricane Rita has come and gone, and we begin our trip home. We have been trying for weeks to get back into New Orleans to retrieve some clothes and important papers. We stay with a friend who lives on the North Shore just minutes from the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway. The city is closed to all but emergency aid workers, the military, and the press. Military checkpoints are set up on every road into the city to enforce a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. curfew. This is a sort of thing we hear on NPR about Iraq or the Gaza Strip, not about an American city. The unthinkable is a reality for us. On the 25-minute ride across the causeway at 5:30 a.m., we listen to the radio. We hear that the mayor is allowing our zip code in today. Then we hear that no one is allowed in. We keep driving and hoping for the best. Our city is empty of all its residents, but in their place are National Guard units from all over the country. The DEA, the FBI, the ATF, the SPCA, even ICE police. Who are they? And of course, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News, and media from all over the world. My husband and I are wearing hospital scrubs in hopes of expediting our entry into the empty city. We discuss the options and which checkpoint will be the easiest to get through. We take Jefferson Highway. As we edge along closer to the checkpoint, my husband positions himself in front of an energy truck. They want utility trucks in, he figures. We are lucky the NOPD is managing this checkpoint. After seeing his hospital ID, the local cop says, "You're okay, go on in, Doc."
September 27th. 2 trees fell on our house, but our hearts are in Vermilion Parish. Warren and I are allowed to enter the town of Erath while it is still flooded to retrieve the most valuable items from the historical museum he founded. Due to the intense heat and lack of electricity, mold and mildew will soon set in, but we are allowed only 1 hour to do our work. The museum is a large part of the economic basis of this small town because it is a tourist attraction. but I try not to get too upset at what we must leave behind. October 5th. Time is a blur as one day fades into the next, filled with fruitless phone calls to FEMA, the Red Cross, insurance companies, and Home Depot. Is the whole world incompetent? The smell of mold stays in our noses, even after we have left the muddy buildings we are tending. Our condo in New Orleans, my husband's mother's house, his grandfather's house, our lake house, the museum, and his branch law office all flooded. But we are the lucky ones. We have clean beds to go home to at night. Out in the country beyond Erath, cows were swept into homes with the floodwaters and died there. Structures were pushed off their foundations and lie helter-skelter in yards and fields. On the homes that remained in place, siding and bricks were washed away, windows blown out, doors gone. Houses looked like dead bodies with eyes wide open, seeing nothing. Filthy, tattered curtains, torn tar paper, and tile flapped gently in the breeze. The hardest hit are the elderly, many of them too frail or too poor to start over. Warren's mother's house is still standing, but it's completely ruined along with almost everything in it. This is the house where my husband was raised and where our children spent many a happy summer day. He does not want to go see it yet, but I cannot stay away. I ride out there alone across downed power lines and around the bodies of dead cows, past ruined houses with owners stumbling through the mud in shock. The water rose up as high as Mrs. Perrin's eaves, but it's gone down now to just a few inches. The first thing I see is a flat-bottomed boat tied up to the mangled gutters on her roof. Some of her neighbors, 9 of them from down the road, fleeing belatedly from the unexpected tidal wave in that tiny boat, got only as far as her house before it began to sink in the roiling floodwaters in the middle of the night. They tied the boat to her roof, climbed on, and clung there, finally to be rescued by helicopter 4 grueling hours later. The rescue was aired live on CNN and witnessed by my traumatized daughter. The yard is now covered with stinking black marsh mud mixed with oil leached from a natural gas facility a few hundred acres away. I had heard that a fawn had gotten swept into Mrs. Perrin's wash house. It did not drown, and family members gently ushered it out. I don't know what happened to it afterward, but I see its mother lying dead in the pasture. Inside the dim house, everything is covered with a thick blanket of mud. The refrigerator is face down on the floor. The sofa is upside down, and chairs are all tumble. The kitchen table, still standing upright, with its tablecloth and centerpiece miraculously still in place, was swept into the den by the floodwaters and was blocking the door. I push my way through and pick up a muddy photograph, still in its frame. Most of the colors have washed away, but the ghostly face of my husband's father still peers out. Incredibly, a clock is still ticking somewhere. It is about 5:30 in the evening. It is dark and too quiet, and I decide it is time to go. I slog through the mud back to my old 4Runner, take off my ruined shoes, and throw them in the back. I start the engine and put it in drive. Instantly, I am stuck in the mud. The smell of marsh mud does not belong in the kitchen of a great-grandmother, a kitchen where endless fragrant roasts have cooked and where sweet dough pies have been baked for generations. Marsh mud in an enclosed space smells sharply piquant, like the smell of new tires mixed with rotting potatoes.
February 2006. It's been 18 months now since Katrina turned our city and our world upside down. New Orleans and the Gulf Coast are cleaning up a bit. Some progress is being made. There are pockets of normalcy, especially in my neighborhood, but even with scores of FEMA trailers everywhere, many residents are still unable to return. What could have been done to provide a better outcome? Could this natural and man-made disaster have been avoided? What could I have done differently? What can I do now? These questions haunt me. I fault myself for my political apathy. I knew, as most of us in New Orleans knew, that most of our politicians are inept at best, and others just plain corrupt. It was easy before Katrina just to shrug it off and say, "There's nothing that I can do." I know now that as a witness to and survivor of Katrina, I can't be apathetic anymore. Chris Rose, a local columnist and Katrina chronicler, said it best. And when they ask you what you were doing after the storm, you can't say, "I was just an innocent bystander." There are no innocent bystanders here.
October 10th. I get a frisson of inspiration. I am an artist and a mother, and raising motherhood to an art form, I gather up my courage in my hurricane collages and go to our regional arts center. In just half an hour, I have an exhibition lined up. In addition to my hurricane collages, I will also display the storm stories from my diary and household items and clothing from my mother-in-law's huge mound of ruined possessions. Once again, I take a trip out to the country. From that mound, I pull up a family photo album. The colors in the photographs have run in the floodwaters until most of them now resemble tiny jewel-like abstract paintings. I dig out a ruined end table, lovingly fabricated by my husband's deceased father long ago, and two mismatched and muddy antique chairs. Next, I open a door in the end table, and out tumble 10 old, outdated, and dirty telephones, inexplicably saved by my mother-in-law probably for decades. I am guessing that my thrifty Cajun French mother-in-law's thinking was somewhere along the lines of, "These phones still work perfectly fine. Someday somebody might need them, and mes chats, they will be glad I saved them." "Mais la," I answer her silently. "I am the one who is glad you saved them. It's been so long since I've had a good laugh." I pull up a sewing basket filled with rusted scissors and packages of needles complemented by an old jelly jar filled with buttons. I find a rosary and a water-filled cellophane pack of Tom's peanuts and 10 old house dresses displaying very prominent waterlines. All of these I toss into the back of the truck. I hang the show the next day. Art transforms these tattered and torn fragments, both the material ones and the psychological ones, into something profound and beautiful. I am mothering again, seeing my art as a life-affirming force in the face of this disaster. But I do worry that evacuees coming out for the opening held during our city's monthly art walk might be wanting to do something finally normal on this night, something that has nothing to do with hurricanes or mud or loss. I proceed cautiously, feeling that my heart is in the right place. People come out for Art Walk in droves. I hear the delicious mixed accents of the New Orleans evacuees, mingling with the lilting Cajun French-flavored English of the locals. Yesterday, an article appeared in the newspaper about the exhibition, and today there is a sign with a description of it outside the gallery. So I believe that most people attend because they really want to see it. My bright little mother-in-law makes an appearance, proudly holding court amongst her own possessions and a crowd of relatives and friends. She sits demurely in one of the antique chairs and seems part of the exhibition. The family joke is that she's so outgoing that she would talk to a post, and now she is deaf as one, but this barely deters her. She enjoys all the attention and the free food and wine, and even manages to squirrel away in a container brought just for this purpose a half dozen or so finger sandwiches and some petit fours. Tears do trickle down a few faces, including that of a relative who lost all to Katrina. She says these are good tears, though, because she has not yet been able to come to terms with her loss. This will take a long, long time.
March 2006. The city is more normal than it was last year. Most of the huge mounds of trash have disappeared. The tangle of barbed wire across the street from my studio is finally gone. The stoplights are slowly being fixed. Businesses and schools are finally reopening. Many of us still get mail delivery to our homes now. We are normal. We don't run up and hug everyone in the grocery store, squealing, "Oh, you're back. How did you do? How was your house?" We will still talk about it now, but less often and with a more circumspect view. Comedy clubs are popular in New Orleans now. Our black humor is keeping us sane, although I hear that depression is up too. It took months for me to stop telling myself that I was fine and to accept that I, like everyone else here, has post-traumatic stress disorder. I have a mild case. It translates in memory loss, inability to focus, fatigue, insomnia, middle-of-the-night chest pains, and general confusion. It's normal. Everyone here has it. Bill Dykes, a local club owner, said, "You know, Katrina was a reset button on anybody who lived here, whether you lost everything or not, whether you were sitting in a hotel in Memphis or you were sitting on your roof. Even if you didn't lose everything, there was a moment during the evacuation that you thought you did, and then you had to redefine your life."
What is it that holds us in South Louisiana together? In days past, where we held together by the beauty of the landscape with its rugged and enduring centuries-old live oak trees? Was it the French language, the hearty joie de vivre, or the closeness of the large extended families? Was it the famous Cajun and Creole cooking and music, the all-pervasiveness of the farming and cattle ranching industries? It was all of these and more. If one person helped another to build his house, then that person would later help the first to build his barn. If I shared my surplus figs and satsuma oranges with you, then you would be certain to bring me pecans and persimmons in season. Even if I had nothing at all to share with you, you would still share what you had with me. Some of these traditions have faded away now that subdivisions have taken the place of the family farm, and children play in neatly clipped yards where cattle once grazed. But the feeling of that commonality remains. I have no satsumas or persimmons to share at present, but the memories of these events remain, and after the storms is translated into the sharing of spare bedrooms when there were people in need of shelter. I have at present no fruit or building skills to share, but I do have my artwork, which expresses my love of these memories and helps to pass them on. It has been difficult in the turmoil of the last year and a half to concentrate on my artwork, but in the midst of cooking supper, folding clothes, and solving hurricane-related problems, I am always thinking about it. My works now are narratives around the hurricanes and about family as well. The air in South Louisiana is heavy with humidity, but also pregnant with our memories, joys, sorrows, and triumphs. Once the waters and the winds have been stilled long enough, once all of the eulogies have been read, once all of us who have come back home again have sturdy roofs overhead, we will be able to celebrate the rebirth of our commitment to each other once again. Here, have some persimmons and some pecans. Karen, why don't you explain what that is?
Yeah, the celebration of the Oaks is a Christmas celebration in the city park, the largest park in New Orleans, and it has lots of lights, and kids from schools would come and sing and have programs, and you drove through and there was Christmas music. And considering the devastation of the trees in the park and what it must have taken just to get those out with chainsaws, just so people could drive, it was remarkable. The resilience of people in New Orleans is incredible, but I don't know, South Louisiana down past Lafayette is even more remarkable. People are that.
Yeah, nobody waited around for government to help because they never expected government to help them ever before anyway, so just got on with it as best they could.
And I thought it was incredible that we were able to organize once again and Mardi Gras 2006. Came back for that as well.
That's right, and then Jazz Fest, which Don Marshall put together right at the very last minute. No, but they didn't want to sponsor it, and it was an incredible Jazz Fest. It was incredible. Yeah. Are you living here now?
How many people here are from Louisiana?
I've got that in a loud voice, so I'm sure you all can hear me. I lived in neighboring Pensacola, Florida. Mind you, we are 200 miles away from New Orleans, and I just wondered, how did you guys survive those howling winds that we felt in Pensacola, 200 miles away for like 14 hours? Because I
During Katrina?
Yes, because I remember telling my husband, if we can feel the wind this hard in Pensacola, Florida, 200 miles away from New Orleans, how are those people living through that wind? The people that,
Well, New Orleans was on the east side, so I mean, we had a lot of damage, but if the levees hadn't broken, the damage would have been bad, but nothing like what it ended up. Because on the east side we were on the west, right? We were on the west side. The east side is worse. You get more winds. But Slidell, you know, the Mississippi Gulf Coast was gone. It was just, everything was gone. Someone told me there were 65 undamaged houses on the whole Gulf Coast, the Mississippi Gulf Coast. 65, from Waveland to Pascagoula. Mary and I have to acknowledge, I took the ones in the 9th Ward, but the ones at the hospital, Julie Curator, who was a young woman with us whose grandfather had died, took those, and I couldn't look at them. She took them while we were all in the hospital together. I couldn't look at them until January this year, 2007, and I just started crying. Yes. Mary had a couple of pieces in there.
That was amazingly powerful. This exhibit in the New Orleans Museum of Art was not necessarily professional photographers that took the pictures. Some of them were, but a lot of them were just people on the street. I mean, every time you click your camera, you have an amazing photograph because nobody's ever seen anything like this before. And the museum was filled, every single room, I mean from floor to ceiling, with amazing photographs. Oh yeah, the water line, right.
It went from supposedly the water line of the houses, you know, from about 6 inches off the ground up to 9 feet. It was salon style. They were all over photographs. Well, I came to find out later, because I had never heard of it. It's an Immigration Control Authority. So, ICE, Immigration Control, and I don't know why they were, I mean, they have ended up trying to get people who were illegals, but it didn't seem like there were that many illegal people in New Orleans 4 weeks after the storm, but they were there. Actually, everybody was there. I mean, there were people, they were all kinds of, those kind of people were in town regardless, just because they needed that much help I mean, places were still flooded 2 and 3 weeks after Katrina, and bodies were still being found months later, so, yes?
How is it to see the people that you were evacuated with at Tulane for so long on those parking decks? I mean, today, do you see them now? Not the patients, but the...
Whether we still see them? Well, we see the people we were with, we knew, so I do see them quite a bit. We bonded just because nobody really knew what was happening. But I know when my husband went back, he couldn't get back into his office, which was part of that complex, till October 10th. And you had to make an appointment, and there was no electricity, and you could only get in for 2 hours. Many people had this experience. And he saw the security guards who were with us, who were still out there, some of the other security guards out there, and nurses, and I've seen it was everybody. It was the telephone operators, the cooks, the janitors, the orderlies, and then there's an excess amount of patients that's in there in the slideshow, but that's what it was like, just watching for hours as more and more bodies came up, and there was no electricity. So what you see, if they needed a machine, everything was done manually. And I don't think, it may be in the program, I don't know, but HCA, which is a corporation here, Hospital Corporation of America, got us out. They were the ones that took, they owned Tulane Hospital, or most of it, and they were the ones. And it took, they were commandeering helicopters. They tried for several days. You couldn't, you just couldn't get people out very quickly.
And that's a national corporation, right?
It's a national corporation, and its base is here in Nashville.
I have a nice postscript about storm stories. The people who stayed in our house, the New Orleans evacuees, Mike and Kate and Alexander, I thought they were a family, but they weren't. Alexander and Mike were father and son, but Kate just worked in the same law firm as Mike, and I put them in the same bedroom, in the same bed, and they never said anything. And about, I don't know, 4 or 5 days later, I found out, and I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You know, Kate, we have another bedroom, do you want to move? And she said, no, it's okay. And Mike's in the background. She's really beautiful. And about 4 or 5 months ago, they got married. And then our other evacuee, who I didn't speak much about, Nina Cooper, she also met someone after Hurricane Katrina, and she's getting married as well. So, you know, some good came out of it.
We all have new friends too here in Nashville.
It's good to count the silver linings. It's good to count your blessings in the face of all this.
I would like to say something. One of the things that I miss the most is walking home from work and dancing in the street. It just doesn't happen.
No.
And so my boyfriend and I were attempting to put together the Category 5 Social Aid and Pleasure Club of Nashville.
That sounds good.
And who knows where it's going to be. I mean, we've had a few things. We tried to get Zach to get it going, and we've had a crawfish boil and all. But I do have information here. Right now, it's pretty much just a distribution list. But if you all want to dance in the streets, then
We're really repollinating America with our culture. Whether we wanted to or not, but you know, we're spreading all of our wonderful customs and delicious food and music to all corners of the world. Well, thank you.
I was going to ask, Mary kind of did this, but if you could give us an update, because I know Felix and I visited you in New Orleans in August, and there's the presence of the hurricane still there, because there's so much work to be done. So how have you guys processed the events of 2 years ago, and how are they still alive? How do you see it now in the construction, or just different problems that you're dealing with, or renovating, or what does Katrina and Rita look like now in your lives as opposed to 2 years ago?
Well, I mentioned that my mother-in-law's house was ruined, and we thought it was ruined, but it was structurally sound. And we let it sit there for 1.5 years without just not knowing what to do, because if another storm surge comes along and we fix it up and spend a lot of money on it, it'll be wiped out again. So we just did not know what to do with it, but we just decided to heck with it. We're just going to rebuild it. Lauren's mother died. A lot of the old people, like I mentioned, were frail, and even frailer after what they all went through. I mean, she had lived in that home for 60 years, and she died. So we decided to use it as a family compound, because, you know, family camp, because we had enjoyed being there so much for so many years. So we rebuilt it, but her community of Henry, Louisiana, is still, you know, empty houses with looking like dead bodies with eyes open, you know, seeing nothing. Although they're clean and their yards are clipped, the owners are still somewhere, and the yards are mowed, but the houses are just empty. Lauren's husband's elementary and high school is closed forever, and it's the cutest little country school. It's just adorable, but it's just too low, and it could not be raised, you know, without tremendous expense. So basically, without the school, that little community's gone. It had a school and a church, and the church was rebuilt, and people from neighboring towns who find maybe their mass schedule more convenient, you know, will populate it, and people who used to live in Henry, who now live in other towns, will come back to their own church. And the neighboring town of Erath is starting to look like somewhat of a kind of down at the heels resort, because a lot of the houses are built up now. They've raised their houses up on tall pilings, sometimes 11 feet, sometimes not tall enough, but it was all they could afford to do, and you wonder, how high will the next surge be, if there even is another one. So, and if you didn't know a hurricane had happened, you might not really notice anything. There's FEMA trailers, but not scads of them, and you might just think they're travel trailers. So it's coming back, but it's slow.
New Orleans is much more complicated. I do have pictures of our house, which had almost minimal damage. It was all on the outside. It was wind damage to the balcony and the shutters and the columns, and the refrigerator was the only thing we had to really get rid of. 500,000 other ones, I guess. But even that, and not having insurance things, we finally finished the last thing November 1st. The last part of that went up. So it's difficult to get things done. And many areas that they didn't think would come back are, but it's slow. What's even sadder is we had a rainfall, and people who had built out in Sheffmantor Highway area and rebuilt, they were reflooded. The pumps, that was about the pumps just not working. And we've had 2 tornadoes where people who were fixing up had houses hit by tornadoes, and it's a challenge to live there. I mean, and the infrastructure and our political system is really a mess. I don't know our hospital situation. They're trying to get Charity Hospital back up. My husband is part-time at this called Baby Charity. But it's just going to take a long time to put it back together. You can come and visit because the tourist areas are still pretty good. Mardi Gras would be fine, the Jazz Fest. But if you travel to the still parts of the Ninth Ward, the pictures in the Ninth Ward, a lot of the devastation, I took those in January, so that was 4 months after Katrina. And there's still areas there that have not been fixed, and the government who bought road home houses, those houses are now just rotting. The government owns them, and they're doing nothing with them. So it's just, it's a difficult situation. Though we do need people to come and enjoy the food, but it's difficult for people who have to live there, and depression is even up higher now this year, not only in New Orleans, but Mississippi too, than it was a year ago, because some people need to lose hope. It's just so slow. But we have wonderful volunteers. I will say that where the government failed, we have groups that continue to come in from churches and schools and help people gut their houses and rebuild things in churches. And so there's some wonderful stories in the midst of a lot of sadness. Someone said it's a terrible hurt. It's just heavy. It's sad to live here. You just feel this heartfelt loss that everybody feels, because the community in the city is just struggling. But thank you for coming and hearing our stories. We really appreciated having an audience, and